There is a highly uncomfortable paradox built into human psychology. We actively run from the things we fear: pain, rejection, isolation. Yet, on an unconscious level, a part of us actually desires and seeks out the exact suffering we are trying to escape. In the Pathwork philosophy, this mechanism is called negative intentionality. It is a deliberate, underlying attitude where a person unconsciously chooses to negate life, actively rejecting joy, growth, and connection. It operates like a hidden shadow self. Even as you consciously strive for happiness, this other part secretly wants to hold grudges, be spiteful, withhold love, and refuse to contribute. It intentionally opts for misery over resolution. We construct this negative state as a defense mechanism. By leaning into anger or despair, we build a thick, protective wall against the terror of the unknown, or the deep fear of being humiliated. If we are already miserable on our own terms, we can't be caught off guard. It also serves as a regressive strategy to preserve our sense of self. A child learns that staying unhappy can be used to punish an unfair universe or force bad parents to change. This part of us would rather remain in pain than admit we are no longer under that old control. Clinging to this misery is an active choice. We maintain it because a part of us falsely equates surrendering to joy with capitulation, as if letting go of our rigid negativity means losing our identity entirely. The moment we recognize our suffering is a deliberate, protective strategy, we gain leverage. By admitting that we are actively choosing this pain, we identify the exact mechanism keeping us stuck, and in that recognition, we regain the power to choose differently. Having negative emotions, fear, hostility, or envy, is a normal part of the human experience. The existence of those feelings is not the actual barrier to a fulfilling life. The true obstacle is our secret identification with those emotions. We allow the destructive, ego-driven parts of our psyche to completely define us, letting the dark paint consume us until we forget the canvas even exists. When you believe you are your ego, enacting change is impossible. The ego's functions are highly limited. It operates on defense and self-preservation, lacking the depth and honesty required to move past habitual suffering. Trying to skip over this darkness by forcefully identifying with a higher self does not work. Ignoring the ego and your negative intentions is a dangerous escape, a purely intellectual belief that lacks the weight of real experience. If we believe the destructive, spiteful parts of our minds represent the total reality of who we are, we remain securely locked inside a mental prison built entirely by our own assumptions. Breaking out of this trap requires a specific cognitive pivot. There is a massive psychological difference between identifying with an emotion and simply identifying it. Imagine sitting in a meeting and experiencing a sudden, intense surge of petty envy toward a colleague who just received praise. The default reaction is to identify with that envy. In that split second, you are entirely swallowed by the feeling. Your brain is tricked into believing that malice and resentment are the sum total of your identity. The necessary intervention is to pause and ask an internal question. Is this really all I am? That single question interrupts the circuit. By questioning your total identification with the envy, you instantly create a new neurological bridge connecting back to your observer self. The part of your mind capable of watching, evaluating, and analyzing the envy is more real and firmly more in charge than the fleeting emotion it is looking at. When you step back to observe a destructive trait, you cease to be the dark paint trapped on the canvas. You become the artist holding the brush, freeing up the necessary internal space to process your honest feelings without being controlled by them. To maintain this distance, your conscious ego must make a firm commitment to change, and then learn to trust your involuntary spiritual self to execute the internal shift. This requires mundane daily work. You have to meticulously examine the habitual, seemingly unimportant thought patterns that usually fly under your radar. As those destructive feelings surface, your mind must confront them. You weigh them intelligently against objective reality, systematically stripping away the childish distortions that keep you stuck. You will face intense internal resistance. Finally, giving up your negative intentionality will initially feel like a loss of power. To the ego, dissolving these long-held defenses feels like a threat to your very existence. But it only feels that way because a false part of you previously relied entirely on the friction of negativity to generate its sense of being alive. Once that negative intention is released, the internal pressure drops. The energy you once used to maintain that rigid defensive stance is suddenly available for your life, as your real self begins to function without the constant weight of sabotage. You stop reacting to the world as a helpless straw in the wind. Instead, you operate as a self-governing, autonomous entity, no longer bound by the need to protect yourself through misery. By systematically observing our darkness rather than embodying it, our perception of reality shifts. We no longer see the world through the distortion of a defensive child, but as a space of genuine opportunity, living finally as the best version of ourselves that has been there all along.